Hello. Before we get down to cinema, I would like to draw your attention to our Patreon. Regular listeners will know that these podcasts are supported by Quad, our home cinema in Derby, UK. But as Quad is a charity, we want to make Cinelit as self-sustainable as possible. So, to that end, we have set up a 2-tier way in which you can support Cinelit. For our 35mm Cine fans, you'll get a bonus additional episode each month where we will be deep diving into an area of cinema that will be exclusive to Patreon subscribers for at least 6 months before it arrives like a late dinner guest on the regular feed. Plus, you get the episodes a week in advance of the main feed release. But if you want to support us and don't feel that pressing need to have the additional podcast each month, but still want that warm, satisfying feeling of being part of the Cinelit success story, then you can become an 8mm Cine fan, where you can donate and get our heartfelt thanks. Head over to the Patreon page and subscribe if you can. However, we know that times are hard at the moment, so please do not feel you need to subscribe if you are not able. We'll still be putting out new, free-to-listen-to episodes on a regular basis throughout the year. Now let's get back to your regular scheduled broadcast.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Taylor, Film Officer at Quad in Derby. This podcast is part of a season we're doing at Quad in September called Reforming the Image, which is focusing on Black and ethnically diverse representation on screen. In the podcast, I'm going to be talking to people in the film industry from a diverse community about representation on screen and the films that they identify with. I'd like to thank the BFI Film Hubs Midlands for funding this podcast. So enjoy. Today I'm talking to Caroline. So, hi Caroline.
Hi Rebecca.
So tell me a bit about yourself, Caroline, and what you do.
I'm a screenwriter and a curator. I also program for and founded a film collective called Under London. So we do like screenings and collaborate with like young filmmakers, emerging filmmakers, really. I don't like to put like an age limit on things. And we're based in London, but, you know, I'm also open to like traveling.
And what sort of projects have you done in the past?
We've done varied amounts. So just this year we did a project called Living in the City, where it was female-based and we promoted filmmakers from London and New York. So it was kind of like a cultural exchange. And it was all virtual-based as well, because during COVID, it was like, we were kind of limited, but I guess you just have to like flip that brick and figure out, okay, we can't meet in person, but we can try and like make use of like connecting virtually to connect with people. We don't have to buy a plane ticket to connect with people overseas. And we collaborated with Tape Collective on one of their screenings they did the whole BFI July season of Where Are You Really From, which was kind of based on that question that people get. And we did like a screening, I think a couple of days ago, last week, I think, where it was open submissions and all the films were based on identity. So really what I try and do is just pick like projects that really speak to me and try and do stuff that is like a platform, really like supports filmmakers and gets their work seen in the right way.
And also it's interesting because when I actually planned to do this season, we actually started it in October last year, and we were hoping to stay open as a cinema at Quad, but unfortunately the November lockdown happened and we had to close again. But it over the course of the pandemic and things, I've had to think about ways in which we can now communicate that doesn't have to be actually in person. So when you talk about working virtually, I think that that's quite interesting. Also, interesting in the sense of when we're looking for sort of commissions and sort of we can make our own seat at the table as such. Instead of waiting for a seat at the table, I mean, we can make our own table, you know, with the extra now virtual aspect that we have and we're more used to now with the pandemic. You know, you can just go on YouTube and things like that. So yeah, that's interesting to hear about. So yeah, so just generally, when I was thinking about this film season, I was trying to think of back when I was a child and sort of representation and what kind of things I looked at. I'm a mixed heritage. I'm white, Caucasian, British, and Black Caribbean. And I actually struggled with particularly finding an identity on screen that I can identify with. And as I've spoken to other people during this series of podcasts, it comes quite clear that I thought it was just an age thing, that obviously I was born in the 90s and it was a particular reflection on perhaps the 90s, but talking to people much older, that isn't the case, which I'll elaborate later. But we sort of were drawing on the same representations, and also internationally, you know, I thought it was a particularly Black British experience, but I've come to realise that it's a very international experience. So I will start with more Black representation than sort of mixed heritage representation, because that came a bit later. But I was just curious with yourself, Caroline, if there was any, growing up, was there anything that you identified with?
I guess like I was born in 93, which is like early 90s. And I guess I think TV wise was like, goodness gracious me, that was the first thing I saw that was like, oh, it's funny, but like anyone can watch it. I think also like I'm mixed race as well. So sometimes kind of was born and raised in East London as well. So it's kind of like Asian central. So sometimes it's obviously I've got like an English name as well. So I guess, you know, when you're mixed race, you kind of like, I don't know, you're trying to like, you get people commenting on like, this is how you should, but like you have to find who you are yourself. Because everyone's got a comment, everyone's got an opinion, and sometimes you know those things can affect you, because as human beings we just want to be loved and understood. Those are the two things. Like my mum is of like, she's Indian Malaysian, but she's also her ancestors are Tamil basically. So normally in like Asian entertainment there is like colorism like within that whole thing. If you're dark skinned they don't really like, but I guess like growing up overall I didn't like, it was kind of like a one a year kind of thing. Like you get one film or like one person, you hang on to it for dear life. And I think that kind of left you kind of feeling a bit like, it was only when I went to India in like 2013 on like a volunteer trip. And I remember looking through the magazine and like seeing people who actually like consistently looked like me, not just one. Like I remember going through it and finally like people actually look like me, that I felt like, oh, like, because I think it's kind of different when you're living in like the UK where it's like it's you're kind of like children of immigrants or whatever to find your identity. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Unlike yourself, my dad's from Jamaica, but I've never been to Jamaica, and I've often thought about the sort of experience I'd have if I went to Jamaica, and would that shape my identity a bit more? Because obviously the white British side of me, I feel like I understand that lifestyle, and particularly from that I grew up a similar place to where my British Caucasian side of the family are from. So I kind of know what it's like. But my dad was born in Jamaica and he often talks about Jamaica, but I've never been myself. So I've always thought that would be quite interesting to see if that shapes my identity a bit more. But as you said, on TV growing up, I would say probably like the Lenny Henry show was something that made me understand a bit more about West Indian culture. But it's a difficult one to try and understand. And growing up, I don't think there was anyone that particularly I could relate to as a child on TV. It was more, and it's quite interesting for me, it was more the Black American experience. So I grew up with like Nickelodeon and obviously like Kenan and Kel and like Sister and all those shows. So it's weird because when growing up, probably the representation that I most identified with was the Black American experience. Yet I'm not Black American, I'm Black British. So it was a strange one. And I never forget my most earliest memory of kind of feeling like there was no representation on screen was the Brandy version of Cinderella. And I was obsessed with that film. I'd go to the library and I would just rent it out all the time. And I remember thinking that the film, I've seen it in recent years, it's not very good. But I think that me watching that so early on has made me sort of understand what I was trying to see. And obviously, particularly growing up, everybody was interested in Disney, and I just never could identify with those Disney princesses and things like that. Obviously, in more recent years, they've made their characters more ethnically diverse. But, you know, when I was growing up, everybody was into The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast. And I never liked Disney. I was never a Disney child, was never interested in it. So, yeah. What about you? Can you remember an early memory of trying to find that, sort of that identity on TV?
Like you, growing up, I identified more with the Black American experience because I remember that Cinderella was important because that was like a rainbow cast. Like everyone was welcome to that party, and you felt like, I felt like that was way ahead of its time in terms of like casting, and even to this day, people still like. That's something that people still go to. That's kind of a classic, really. So I think that was way ahead of its time. But growing up, I remember I used to watch loads of sitcoms, really, but it was just good. When I was growing up, this was before streaming, right? So like we have to give a disclaimer. Anyone who's like 20 or under, like this is a little bit of a lesson. So growing up, we didn't have Netflix, none of that stuff. Disney Plus, no. You had like your Skybox and you had your standard channels. So with Trouble, you got all your like American-based sitcoms and reruns of like Fresh Prince, One-on-One, Girlfriends, all of that stuff. So, or BBC Two, or sometimes they'll show like 6A, they'll have like Fresh Prince. But Fresh Prince was like a crossover, like everyone, like it was just star power of Will Smith, and the show was just like good, great. Like, so everyone kind of watched that. Before, a lot of the British shows like, or Channel 4 was really like nothing I could identify to. Even when I was like older with like In-Betweeners, like really couldn't identify. Even Skins maybe, but still I think that was still maybe Dev Patel's character on it and his family, but it was kind of like, that was still a predominantly white cast, Skins.
Yeah. I was the same. I never liked Skins. I just never saw. Yeah, I tried to watch a few episodes and I wasn't feeling it. I didn't like it at all.
I think Skins, maybe when I came out, it was like I was like 13, 14. I think that was maybe like for like the later teens who were like starting college. I think I was a bit too young for that at that time, but right. I remember it did have like cultural impact. I do remember people talking about it. I do remember the kind of like people on MySpace or whatever, like, having all discussions. But I think even on the mainstream channels, it was like soaps that you would look to for people. And like, I always find it interesting in like Coronation Street or EastEnders. Like, we know if you're from Manchester or like, especially East End of London, there's more than one Asian family on a street. But like in those soaps, they would just have like one Asian family at a time. And I think maybe like the Masood family and EastEnders, like they were because I think they were actually a quality family. They didn't axe them so soon. Like they actually kept that one running. So maybe that was, and all the actors from that family, like Himesh Patel and like, I think Nadia Wadia from Goodness Gracious Me, they were all doing their thing before, and now they're really doing their thing. So I think they invested in the right talent. But I guess when we were growing up, there just wasn't, even the Disney girls like Miley, Demi, Selena, there wasn't. Now you've got like, it's getting more like diverse, but in that era, it was very like, they had a formula and a recipe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I would say the same, like when you watch the soaps, which probably, I'm just guessing here, I'm not sure, but quite a big percentage of the country watches at least one soap. And it's quite a reflection of British society, sort of the way that we embrace the soaps in the UK. I think I've had discussions with other friends, it is completely different to other countries. The soaps are there, but they're not religiously watched like they are like Coronation Street, EastEnders are always on at the prime spot, of an evening. And it's something that you tended to watch with your parents or, your siblings. And the fact that, with EastEnders, I always used to think the same. I used to think it's supposed to be set in East London, and there's hardly any families from ethnic backgrounds, and even I think it's quite interesting for me as well in EastEnders, watching the Caribbean family. Are they kind of Fox/Truman family? It's quite interesting because of the way that they decorate their house is very of a particular West Indian culture, which is probably more of a reflection on Patrick. But it's quite interesting looking at the other characters in the sense of the way their house is and everything. But at least I can say that some aspects of it are, I would say, authentic. But, then there still is some really bad stereotypes in that as well. But yeah, the same with the Masood family. Like you mentioned, the actor that played the son,
Himesh Patel.
Yes, yeah. He's gone on to become, a really successful actor, and obviously starring in Yesterday. And then I saw him in
Tennant.
a film.
He was in Tennant as well.
Oh, he was in Tennant. Oh, okay. I didn't see Tennant, but yeah. So exactly, it's quite interesting, and watching. It's quite funny that watching those actors start on soaps and then they go on to do really interesting work. It's funny. But yeah, but again, I would say that's probably would have been a constant representation growing up for me, somewhere where I would have constantly been looking for somebody that was like me. And it's quite interesting because I was talking to the filmmaker of Doubles with Slight Pepper, Ian, and he grew up in Canada. And he says that when he was growing up, he used to watch Desmond's, which is quite interesting. And I said, I used to watch Desmond's as well. And then we both realised how long ago that was made, and, of the great Norman Beaton. But we were struggling to find, and I was embarrassed in the sense that I was struggling to find, programs I was watching in the 90s that I thought was, a true reflection of me. So that's interesting. Is there any sort of films that you sort of felt like whether you might have not thought that they were particularly a authentic representation of, but you noticed that you were drawn?
I think films like obviously Bend It Like Beckham, that was and I think people take the African diaspora is vast because you've got Caribbean, African American, there's all different experiences vast. But I think Bend It Like Beckham, it was just a great film, and it was just I remember everyone enjoyed it, and I think that was really so progressive and ahead of its time. So I think growing up that, obviously you had Slumdog Millionaire, and I think some American stuff you had Harold and Kumar, but sometimes we would try, I think for me, though it was kind of you have one film a year, so The Namesake, Brick Lane, or I think we had some good stuff. I remember watching East as East, and I just thought that was funny. It may not have been my specific experience, but it was good to see some representation on screen. And I think those films were really cool. Even I think this decade we have progressed, because even recently you've got Riz Ahmed doing his thing with Mogul Mowgli, even with I think it's the new Dev Patel film where he's playing the Green Knight.
Yeah,
that's coming out. And with obviously you've got I think now you've got, before you did have superstars, but now you have superstars such as Riz, Priyanka Chopra, Jonas, even Himesh. He's kind of really doing his thing now. So you've got people who can lead a movie and can carry it, whereas I think back in the day people were still good, but they weren't getting the dues that they deserve. Before, it was kind of the films would always be about interracial, Bride and Prejudice, or the films would be, the whole film will be about, okay, two cultures, that's the only thing the film is about, these two cultures meeting, where it's why can't we just have it we're beyond that now, that, why can't we have other films where it's just like people just living their everyday normal lives.
Yeah.
But with the whole EastEnders thing, I think the whole E20 thing was kind of progressive as well. When I don't know if you remember it when they
is that's the online, was it online, or it was like the spin-off thing that they did, wasn't it, about like the younger group of friends?
Yes.
Yeah.
I wish they actually like continue, like I don't know what kind of, maybe they are still doing it, but I think that a lot of talented actors kind of came through that and were like writing their own episodes and stuff, similar to like the approach that Skins had. But I think obviously that Four Lions was like super controversial as well. But I think, you know, some of these films, like growing up, it was just like you get one a year, and that's just like you're like, oh, okay, well, wait. And I know feature films take like a year to make, like a year to edit, and then so I understand. And the UK film industry doesn't have the budget that Hollywood has.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand the logistics of it now, getting older, like that. I think there was some good stuff, but I think it like we just didn't have the infrastructure to really, you know, create our own content. And you know, you look at Bollywood and like, wow, like how much content they produce, or even like Nollywood, if you're going to like Africa has a whole film industry. So I think it's about looking at those industries and being like, okay, what are they doing that we're not?
I think it's quite interesting as well, thinking when you talk about like Bend It Like Beckham and things like that, in the sense of that our talent go to America and go abroad. And I don't think that necessarily is a reflection on our industry. Like, obviously, America is Hollywood, so they are going to gravitate more towards that. But I think that there needs to be sort of a way that we look at sort of homegrown talent and keeping more of the Black British representation. But like you were saying a moment ago as well, I always felt if I did have somebody that I identified with more on screen, it was always a conflict. So with you were saying about cultures, quite a recurrent theme obviously is racism when you look at the Black British experience, and obviously that is something that you do have to face every single day. But I just want to film it also about an ice cream man that happens to be Black, and the story about that, or, you know, just a story about, and it's just that the character happens to be of, you know, Black British. I think that's quite interesting as well, of the sort of different stories that we can tell, because obviously racism is one aspect of it, but I would say it would have been nice to see more different stories being told. Definitely. And also when you were talking about, you know, with Bend It Like Beckham and films like that, the sense of the regional representation. So I don't know as much obviously about the sort of South Asian representation, but do you feel, I know it's difficult coming from London, but do you feel like it was necessarily more of one particular area?
Yeah, I remember I watched when doing this research for this, like we kind of had like a timeline of films, and there's a really cool like E4 film called Wild West, which is, I think it's way ahead of its time. It's about these from Southall, these Pakistani brothers who want to be country singers. It's like, I didn't even know it existed, but I watched it and I really enjoyed it. But the film is set in Southall, and Bend It Like Beckham is based in Hounslow as well. So like a lot of Asian films are kind of based in the West London, which there is like a big Asian community. So I did think, because like when doing my research, I realised there are some stuff like Man Like Mobeen, the TV series.
Oh, yes, yeah.
That's based in Birmingham. East as East is like Lancashire. I think also, what do you call it? There is some regional representation, and Anita and Me is the Black Country, but I think there was just no like, what about Scotland? What about Wales? Like, it was just very kind of, and even within London, I just feel, and a lot of things about that those stories were about like conflict and identity and existing in those areas. So I think there was kind of like attempts to making it. I think even like Manlo, Mo Bean, like when you just watch it, you listen to the accent, you know it's not from London, like the way the girl was speaking. And I think that was so refreshing to hear, someone who didn't have like a RP or London accent. You can tell that she's Northern, and having those stories kind of told. I think also even with like Black British stories, a lot of them are like London-centric. We don't really see much from Manchester, Birmingham, or even just outside of those major cities as well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because when you obviously mention like Anita and Me and like that's Mira Sayal and, you know, East is East, I think that that's more probably because the talent behind it that made it are talking about reflecting on some of their experiences, and that happens to be from where they are from. But when I think about like Black British, it very much is London centric, particularly growing up it was. And you know, there's a big Caribbean community in Bristol, in Birmingham, but it's to me, it felt very London-centric. Obviously, you've got Lenny Henry that's from Dudley, but apart from that, I can't think of many experiences that are not London-centric. Like you said, I can think of examples of the South Asian representation where it is other places, but I think that might be more to do with the talent behind it. So yeah, I think that's interesting to see. More thinking about going forward, can you think of anybody that's sort of creating their own content and, you know, trying to maybe perhaps change that?
Yeah, I think even just like circling back, I think MIA was the first person I saw that I was like, this is an actual representation of me, because I never saw anyone that looked like my mom, because my mom's of like Tamil descent, so they're dark skinned, they have like a specific tone of hair. Like MIA was the first person I saw that I was like, she highlights her hair. You know, sometimes with that Asian portrayal, it can be quite traditional in the way they wear their clothes. Like MIA was like performing next to Kanye West when she was like 9 months pregnant on the Grammys, and like with her music videos of like driving cars through the desert and like. And I think the whole thing with sometimes in that era, it can be very easy to just not pass as Asian when you want to, but to like MIA, she'd let you know all the time that she was like Sri Lankan, that she was political, like, and, you know, I think she was the first person like I saw that I was like, okay, like this is someone who, she was the only person for so long. I think music is a whole other story as well, but so much of when you're growing up, you're watching music videos, TV. So I think MIA was still like a pioneer. Even other people I speak to, they were like MIA, you know, because I think she was just unapologetically her. Whereas even in films, I would watch actresses, and sometimes some of them would be mixed race and they would play like maybe other race roles. They will be dipping in and out, but MIA was very unapologetic. Like, and I think in the long run, that's actually paid her dividends, because people like, you know, even if her music is not your thing, like she was someone that you like knew, and she really pushed the boundaries of what your reference was for like a South Asian female. I think these days there's like, you've got like Nida Manzoor, who does like We Are Lady Parts, that new Channel 4 series. Kind of watching that and Wild West, like I kind of see some, I don't know if that was a reference, but I'm seeing like the Butchers, the band, like I don't know, that may not have been a reference at all, but it's kind of interesting doing your research and seeing the links going forward. Obviously, like I know this is like a weird reference and it's not necessarily in film, but I think even Zayn Malik for like the mainstream media and seeing, obviously he's from Bradford, he's of like Pakistani heritage as well. I think he was very important as well. And like, I think sometimes, you know, there's independent people doing their thing, but also in culture in general, just having that face in like one of the biggest like bands ever. And he was very unapologetically himself as well. So I think he was someone who's important. Now you've got just in the media kind of Joy Crooks, like Ravina, who are really like unapologetically themselves. So you can see the lineage of the MIAs kind of being you know, the legacy of that being in these like pop stars who do kind of are important in representation, whether or not we like it or not. I think creators obviously got Mindy Kaling from like Never Have I Ever, and she's unapologetically herself as well. Like she makes it Never Have I Ever. Like I love that show, and it's kind of interesting seeing the teen space. It's really important to have like kids shows, or I don't know if you saw any film like TV shows growing up that were kind of like you could identify with.
Yeah, like it's a weird one. Like for me, again, it was those Nickelodeon shows like Sister Sister and like Keenan and Kel, which is quite interesting because now watching those back, that wasn't at all like my life. It was more a lot of my family do actually live in America, so I've a couple of times gone out there, and it's very much there. It's obvious that it's their experience, and you know the references within the TV shows, you know, like Chuck E. Cheese and all those like outdoor cinemas and things like that. And it made me really realise that I was kind of identifying with these people, but they were so different from actually the life that I lived. So yeah, I struggled to find somebody that I'd say really that I would identify with. And again, like you were saying with MIA, I can't think of for me, I liked rap music, but again, it was just not so far removed from the life that I lived. And I can think I used to dress, you know, I loved my Air Jordans and things like that, but it was not it's kind of weird because I was trying to pull that representation to try and get that for me. But now looking back, it was obvious that was missing. That's why I draw to that representation. But now I would say that wouldn't be the case.
I think even with like MTV, I remember there used to be a presenter called Tim Cash, and I remember like being so happy. It's little things, even Jamila Jamil when she was on, you know, like when T4, like that was actually a thing back in the day, kids. There used to be a thing called T4 where if you wanted to watch Friends and all your American TV shows, they'll have slots during the day.
Yeah.
I think she was important. I remember the first time I saw, even though like, you know, nowadays everyone knows who Jamila Jamil is because of her like activism work. But back in the day, she was just like this really pretty T4 presenter, and that platform had like Alexa Chung, like a lot of like, if you wanted to be a presenter, that was the go-to platform. But I remember seeing those representations, and I think even I was into like Keenan and Kel and like, you know, those American shows because they were just great. Like everyone can enjoy it. So like my hope is that there can be a show like that we can individually identify with, that crosses over, that everyone can appreciate the community, but they're just cross over because they're like so great. So that's like my hope, that there can be just a show about like two mixed-race brothers who like run a shop in like Derby or whatever, and like you know, that people will watch and be like, oh, I'm not of this culture, but like I still really like it and I've learned something.
Yeah, I think that is the key, is to have stuff in there that your community can identify with, but just generally, it's just, I think that's the key, is to have just human situations and situations you face, because I think that is a little bit why I was saying about, I just want a story where that character happens to be black. But yeah, thinking back on, like, I would say obviously Michaela Cole is probably the best person to look at with that, and the crossover that she has, you know, as a black British female, but also, you know, you can identify with stuff, you know, in her work. Obviously, some of it is difficult to watch, but, you know, I think it's themes that sort of across the board. And also as well, like with comedy. So I'm just trying to think of like Citizen Khan. I used to find that funny. And then it's funny, like I used to watch that with my friend who is from a South Asian background, and she I highlighted stuff within it that I didn't pick up on, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that one, people either love it or hate it, Citizen Calm. But I think that was some representation on screen, and like I think it's about moving forward. I think there needs to be like, I read a saying yesterday that someone posted on Snapchat. It says if nothing changes, nothing changes. So if we don't change some of the practices we're going to have, we're going to, like, I think there has been, when doing our research and stuff, like even towards the end, it'll be good to like just acknowledge the names of people who've been doing their thing. Because I think there has been people really doing their thing. Like it just, they haven't had that major infrastructure to just continue to facilitate the work that they've been doing. Even watching Goodness Gracious Me, it's kind of like TikTok length skits as well. I had a watch back yesterday and how ahead of its time it was, how tight the ensemble cast was. Those people were like way ahead of their time, really. So I think, even with the sitcoms, obviously, major broadcasters, there's only a number of slots available each like commissioning round, I guess. But I think with streaming, the possibilities are kind of endless now. So I think it's about, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I think now, like, there must be some, like, rich people in the community or just some people, allies, who are like, okay, like, how do you feel about the whole, like, Channel 4? Is it black to front?
Yeah. Well, I just personally, sometimes I feel like, as long as you get a variety of the Black British experience, so that it's not focused so much on racism or one aspect of it, because it then becomes that defines you. But obviously, Channel 4 were quite instrumental, in the 1980s and when they started up in improving Black representation. But I have mixed feelings about it. But yeah.
Yeah, I heard that they're commissioning like a new series called like Big Age. I think they are doing good stuff, and I think it's just about keeping that consistency up, really. Really finding the funding and the resources to make these shows possible. Because I feel like in the 90s there was a lot of like African American sitcoms out there. They were just if you were like a celebrity, everyone could, like, you had the Jamie Foxx show, Sister Sister, Cousin Skeeter. Like we can create like a whole episode just on like these sitcoms. And I think the productions cost money, right? So someone must have been financing them. I think my hopes is like, on Amazon when you have those add-ons like Star or like Movie or BFI Player, we just need to have like a network or something. I know we've got BBC Asian Network or like other ethnic. I think now we just, if nothing changes, nothing changes. There needs to be like an influx of funding now and an infrastructure to like, because I think there are a lot of young writers out there. There are a lot of young creators out there. It's about giving them these slots to produce a show. And, because I think we're past the stage of just having like one thing a year now. I think with streaming, people are, how many shows are out there these days? We need to have like more things, and I don't know how easy that is to build an infrastructure, whether or not it has to go onto a major broadcaster or a major company, or if there can be something independent set up. Like you see with Bollywood, they've got like ZTV and Star. Even BET, before Viacom bought it, was Black Entertainment Television, which was made because their shows just wasn't given the right platform and space. So I think there just needs to be one created. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always ask the question with why is obviously the Black American experience there's a lot more than other countries. And I think it's to do with where the money is and the creatives. You've got like Tyler Perry and Spike Lee that are able to do their own thing and have the funds to do their own thing. This is just the impression that I get. In the UK, you still are more dependent on those institutions in order to commission your work, like the BBC. So, yeah, it's all about, I think, making your own table instead of waiting for a seat at that table, which I think will get better with the way that things are now shifting, to virtually, like you can create your own stuff. For instance, that amazing Fresh Prince trailer that guy made. It was a movie. I remember watching that thinking, that's like movie quality. And he obviously just came up with the idea and just decided to, film with friends. And I haven't really followed much lately, but I think they're going to, it obviously got the attention of Will Smith. So I think, you can make stuff happen more than, more the traditional sense of waiting for your work to be commissioned. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is what I'm proposing, because, I think we just need to set up, or get conversations going, but also, because I think that series, has been commissioned for, HBO Max. I think they had a bidding war for that thing, and he's a filmmaker beforehand, but he was just like, okay, I think he put his own money into making that trailer as well, because obviously
it was money. Yeah.
You can tell by the look of it that, he knows what he's doing. Those are great equipment. I think, there's so many great, I think we need to just put out content, and I think it's a whole thing of people just working together to make this thing work. So say, for instance, you've got on the theatre side of things like Kahani, Tamasha Theatre. There's a new organisation called Kahani Arts as well. You've got Burnt Rotty, independent organisations and publications, Juice Droplet. Even I think it would be really cool to have with Tyler Perry, he's able to fund his own productions. Marvel uses his film sets and that just puts more money into his bank account. I think we need to kind of have a think and realise, we need funders from our own community, and because there's no Black-owned or POC-owned major movie studios in the UK. There's none, zero. Yeah. In the US, you've got Tyler Perry, and I think you have a couple of independent ones. Obviously, Tyler Perry's the biggest one. We need to start having our own, otherwise we're going to be always waiting for that one slot or whatever. And I think things are progressing, but I think with digital now, we need to realise that the space for content is infinite now. It just has to have that quality control in it for it to be seen. But I really do think, I know they've got a lot of writer schemes and incubation schemes for projects. I even think, because I know that you work in a venue as well, and I know a lot of people have connections to venues. I think with the research we've done and the amount of things, I think we can definitely have I know BFI had Black Star season where, they celebrated talent. I think we could definitely, with the shows and stuff we listed, we could have a whole month's.
Yes.
We just hire someone to just in our budget just to secure the rights and to sort all that stuff out. I think sometimes when you show that content, people will come away from that screening and be like, oh, I've got an idea, I want to do it like this. Or so I think venues as well, just programming seasons where just being consistent with that. But I definitely do think I think we do have major stars now who can lead a film and carry it. I think from both of our communities.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And with Riz Ahmed and the work that he's been doing recently, that really shows. But also, it's quite interesting how long ago he started his career, and he's just starting to now to do work outside of that and be able to create his own work. But
those are the people that have paved the way, the Riz Ahmed, even Priya Kalidas, and those are people in the early noughties that were really putting in their shifts.
Definitely.
Going through all those obstacles, because there wasn't now they're able to, because of the hard work and the talent they have. But I think now we have to also think not just about creating content, but also having the infrastructure to show it and to commission it. So I think it's a lot to do with just thinking outside of, and not everyone's going to be a writer or an actor. There's also room for just financiers, financiers, even people to own you know, if you've got land and you want to open your own studio base or like theatre and you just want to set something up in that way, I think as a community we need to start to like work together. And I'm always looking forward to like positive disruptors in the industry, you know. So I don't know, like I'm obviously I would love to help in any way, but I think I'm really looking forward to just seeing, like, you know, in the 90s, how there was just so much content out there, but it was good content, but it was like everyone kind of had a voice and a platform. Not everything made it past the first season, but like there was a variety and like representation. I think that kind of needs to happen now. And I know like these streaming services do have like massive budgets to like fill their content and to keep, they don't want people to unsubscribe, basically. Like they need to keep people on there. And I know Disney Plus they've got a new scheme for like new filmmakers and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's called Story Labs or something. I think they had like
I think I've heard of that, yeah.
A short film about like American Need, and I think that's Disney's like the biggest. And even they've got a new Marvel movie. I think it's the first like Pakistani like superhero.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
With the success of like Black Panther, that was important in, you know, breaking down the doors. I think as well, we can look to the major things, but major things also start independently. So I think as a call to action, even within my own like collective or whatever, it's just about putting out really cool work, whether or not it's an event, a season, you know, even, you know, funding independent films and stuff, and just being consistent with that. And hopefully, you know, like you said, creating your own table, you know, opening the door for yourself. And hopefully that will get the attention of like-minded people who have keys to other doors.
Yeah.
Because, you know, every job is an audition for the next job. So I think we now have to kind of like think, okay, cool, like how can we, you know, show people there is talent, there is different stories out there.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And I think it's about coming together and you know, sharing each other's resources, in the sense of, I think we just always think about the director and the writing and things, but it's obviously where you're going to get all this money from, the finance. And I think that is something that I've recently been thinking about. I think it's where the money lies as well to get those going. But yeah. Oh, well, it's been great talking to you, Caroline.
Thank you so much. And hopefully, you know, we can do some kind of like event. I think now like we've kind of we've got some research, and I guess I'll continue to like add to the doc as well, like of things I see, because it's always, sometimes I spot something, I'm like, I didn't know this existed. It goes straight on the doc. So I think like, definitely like, thank you so much for having me on. And I just want to shout out all the independent people out there who have been doing their thing. You know, there's so many shorts we've been watching, even some from the 80s or 90s that were like way ahead of their time. Their work, and there's platforms like BFI Player, which is really important in preserving those works and giving them a continuous platform. So I just want to shout out those people who paved the way. The tribute will always be continuous because, you know, without them, you know, they've done the hard work for us now. So our job is to continue that on.